We kick things off with a tense scene at a deserted shipping yard. Mickey and Bobby, who happens to be the son of mob boss Howard Saint, show up to seal an arms deal. They're meeting Otto, a weapons dealer, who comes down to inspect the cash. Things seem smooth until the Russian mafia also arrives to finalize the trade. Suddenly, chaos erupts. FBI agents swarm the place, guns blazing. Otto tries to pull out his weapon, but gets gunned down instantly. Bobby freaks out, and in the middle of all this madness, someone shoots him dead, leaving Mickey in shock. The FBI team declares Otto dead and hauls him off in an ambulance, only for the big reveal. Otto was actually an undercover agent named Frank Castle. Despite the mission's success, Frank feels awful about the casualties. But hey, work's done, so he calls it a day. Frank's got retirement on the horizon, and his colleagues throw him a surprise party to celebrate his career. They shower him with praises, calling him the best agent ever. After saying his goodbyes, he heads out, ready for a fresh start. Meanwhile, over at Howard Saint's luxurious mansion, the news of Bobby's death lands like a bomb. Howard and his wife are crushed. Soon after, Mickey gets bailed out of jail by a couple of Howard's goons. They rough him up, blaming him for Bobby's death. Mickey tries to explain that Bobby insisted on being part of the deal, but nobody's listening. He spills the beans about Otto organizing the deal, but since Otto's dead, Howard doesn't care. He's laser-focused on revenge. In a fit of rage, Howard grabs a gun, not to kill Mickey, but to shoot Bobby's bodyguard instead. The poor guy tries to explain himself, but Howard doesn't give him a chance and takes him out without a second thought. Frank, now officially retired, is back home with his wife, Maria. She's thrilled to finally have him all to herself. Frank reassures their son that they won't have to move anymore since he's settling down for good. Life's looking peaceful, but it's not going to last. Howard, seething with anger, visits the morgue to see Bobby's body. FBI agent Jimmy tries to calm him down, telling him to leave the investigation to the professionals. But Howard's not interested in playing by the rules. He bribes some shady federal agents to dig up Frank's service records. After Bobby's funeral, Howard discovers Frank's real identity and learns that he's vacationing with his family in Puerto Rico. Howard's wife, cold as ice, orders Quinnen, one of Howard's men, to make sure Frank's entire family is wiped out. In Puerto Rico, Frank is enjoying time with his big extended family. His dad is overjoyed to see him, and they're all having a blast. Frank and Maria take a romantic walk on the beach, talking about having another kid. The next day, their son gives Frank a thrift store t-shirt with a skull design, saying it's supposed to ward off evil spirits. Frank loves it and puts it on, but trouble's brewing. Howard's heavily armed men are already on their way to the resort. While Frank and his dad are checking out his old gun collection, they hear gunfire outside. Chaos explodes as the attackers open fire, picking off family members one by one. Frank and his dad grab their guns, managing to take out a few of the attackers, but it's not enough. Maria and their son try to hide on the beach, but they're cornered. Frank and his dad fight back with everything they've got, but the attackers keep coming. Frank's dad takes a bullet, leaving Frank to face the attackers alone. Meanwhile, Maria and their son spot a car and make a desperate dash for it. The bad guys chase them down, shooting at the car until they blow out a tire, flipping it over. Maria, injured but determined, pulls her son out and heads toward a boat dock. But Howard's men catch up to them, running them down before they can escape. Frank arrives at the dock just in time to see his wife and son lying lifeless on the ground. Overcome with grief, he clings to their bodies. The attackers spot him, and a brutal fight breaks out. Frank gets shot multiple times, beaten up by Bobby's twin brother, John, and then dragged to the edge of the dock. They shoot him again, set the dock on fire, and leave him for dead. But Frank doesn't die. Somehow, he survives, pulling himself out of the water and washing up on shore. A local fisherman, Candelaria, finds him and nurses him back to health. 5 months pass, and Frank is nearly fully recovered. His grief turns into a burning need for revenge. Gathering his father's weapons, Frank prepares for war. He finds the skull t-shirt his son gave him and makes it his symbol. Candelaria advises him to seek God, but Frank's mind is set. He's going after Howard. Frank heads back to New York and moves into a rundown apartment. He stocks up on weapons, rigs the place with traps, and even modifies an old Pontiac, turning it into a bulletproof battle car. His neighbors, Joan, Bumpo, and Spacker Dave, are curious about him, but also a little scared. One day, Frank kidnaps Mickey and chains him up in his apartment. He threatens Mickey, demanding info about Howard. Scared for his life, Mickey spills everything, including details about Howard's money laundering operation. Mickey admits he hates Howard and agrees to help Frank, even revealing that Howard's wife is the real mastermind behind their criminal empire. Frank begins following and secretly taking pictures of Howard John Quinton, discovering that Quinton is gay. To send a chilling message, Frank uproots his tombstone and drops it on Howard's golf course, letting him know he's back. He later confronts Jimmy and the police chief, demanding justice for his family's murder, but they refuse to act because of Howard's influence. Determined, Frank breaks into Howard's cash reserves, takes down some guards, and orders the men inside to gather the money. He then slices the glass open and throws the cash out of the window, creating chaos as people outside scramble for the falling bills. As Frank steps outside, two men confront him, leading to a tense showdown. Frank quickly eliminates them both and heads back to his apartment, burdened by memories of his family and drowning his pain in alcohol. Meanwhile, Howard meets with Quinton and John, wondering how Frank is still alive. Two furious mob brothers show up, demanding compensation from Howard for the money Frank tossed out. Joan, locked in her room, is being terrorized by her unstable ex-boyfriend, who's banging on her door. When Spacker and Bumpo step in to help, the ex strikes Spacker. Frank intervenes, punching the ex and chasing him off. Joan thanks Frank for his help and apologizes for any trouble her situation caused. Frank then tracks down Livia and plants an explosive near her car before stealing it. Using a voice changer, he calls Quinton and threatens to expose incriminating photos unless Quinton meets him at a hotel with $5,000. Frank parks Livia's car in a handicapped spot at the hotel, earning her a ticket. He waits until Quinton arrives, then returns the car to its original spot. Later, Mickey informs Howard that he saw Quinton at the hotel. When Howard hears Quinton and Livia laughing, he starts questioning their whereabouts. Quinton denies leaving, claiming Mickey made a mistake. At a cafe where Joan works, Frank sits with Bumpo and Spacker. A man enters, sits nearby, and begins staring at Frank. He pulls out a guitar, plays a tune, and claims it's a song for Frank's funeral. Later, Frank is ambushed while waiting near a bridge. His car is rammed, and the man from the cafe emerges with a gun. Frank barely dodges the gunfire, but nearly hits a bystander. Crawling from his car, Frank uses a ballistic knife to take out the attacker. That night, John is guarding a cash shipment for Howard when he hears a ticking sound. Realizing it's a bomb, he leaps off the boat just before it explodes. Furious, Howard orders Quinton to handle the situation and bring in a Russian. Meanwhile, Frank receives an unexpected knock at his door. It's Spacker asking for help with Joan's ex-boyfriend, who has returned. Frank rushes over, only to find out that his friends had tricked him into joining them for dinner. During the meal, Frank eats heartily but offers little in return, merely thanking them for the food. Spacker and Bumpo step away, leaving Frank and Joan alone. She tries to comfort him, saying happy memories can save him, even leaning in for a kiss. Frank, still consumed by his mission, declines and leaves. Back in his apartment, Frank hears another knock at the door. This time, it's a Russian thug who attacks him. Frank manages to pour boiling water on the attacker's face, wrestles him down the stairs, and ultimately kills him. Spacker and the others drag Frank back to his apartment to tend to his wounds. Soon after, Quinton and his men arrive, demanding to know Frank's whereabouts. Spacker and Bumpo hide Frank and refuse to give him up, even when Quinton begins torturing Spacker by ripping out his piercings. Despite the pain, Spacker says nothing, and Quinton leaves empty-handed. Touched by their loyalty, Frank asks why they risked so much for him. Spacker simply says they're like family now. Frank prepares for his final mission, gathering weapons while ignoring Joan's plea to reconsider. With his plan in motion, he frames Livia and Quinton, planting evidence of an affair. Howard confronts Quinton, kills him in a fit of rage, and later murders Livia, convinced of her betrayal. Fully armed, Frank storms Howard's estate, eliminating guards, setting traps and planting explosives. In the final confrontation, He forces Howard to face the truth about how he manipulated him into destroying his own closest allies. Frank ties Howard to a car, rigs it with explosives, and drives it slowly through a fiery path, ensuring a gruesome end. Though Frank considers ending his own life afterward, a vision of his wife changes his mind. Instead, he decides to use his pain as a weapon against evil, leaving money for his friends before setting out to continue his mission as the Punisher. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to subscribe for more. See you next time.